quite a market. You see, in any company's diversification strategy, often includes some kind of geographic expansion, whether going to Russia or Germany or Sweden or so forth. So just from the top of this, we can say that as a place to go to do business compared to other regions on this planet, South African markets via Namibia are quite stable. We know what can happen with Russia when the geopolitics places sanctions, with currency fluctuations and so forth, and different restrictions even in our close markets. So anyways, looking at Namibia as a gateway, we know it's only 2.3 million. So we can't think in those terms. Not a big market. So we have to always consider it as the starting point, as Minna brought out right from the beginning. You have all those areas, all those countries nearby, and you can move in from Namibia, the so-called main entrance to them all. There's harmony there. It's sustainable there. Or I should say it's stable there, and there's sustainable development going on there. Of course, there's challenges to growth. There is poverty, income inequality, but it's getting better. There's unemployment. But it's very safe to do business. Low corruption. This is not Uganda, Patria and stuff like that going on there. There's huge differences between countries in Africa, huge continent. And I've been to Namibia, and we know that the letter or the rule of the law is upheld there. So when doing business there, some of these preconceptions of that distant market have to be left at home. Keep in mind also that patience is a virtue. There has to be commitment to this Southern African region. One has to be open-minded. That may sound like a cliche, but really we have to get rid of those premises and preconceptions and assumptions that we've had about that region. I bolded the long-term approach. You may have a plan, but it's going to change a bit over time, how you enter. You may think you'll do export, but you're actually maybe doing a joint venture and involved with something else. Personal relationships are important, and that takes time. Of course, needing the local professional advice as you go in. Within the region, there's differences. And particularly when we're looking at Finland and Finnish companies, there will be a cultural divide. Bit of language barrier there. So in the market, there are a few challenges as far as how you get to market. There is some physical distribution challenges, even though they have their roads. A lot of investment in their infrastructure. Rail is not working too well. The port is excellent. It's not like it's like it is here in Western Europe. Minna mentioned that there is a lot of urbanization going on, and there is some scarcity. It doesn't rain very much. Shortages of water. But these challenges become opportunities. And looking just at the culture in itself, within that small country of 2.3 million people, there are various ethnic groups. No, they have the English as the main language, and most people can communicate in that. There are different between what you would say ethnic groups. However, it is quite peaceful. This is not a warring tribal ethnic divide or something like that. And thinking of the lifestyle, there's the idea of Ubuntu. You might have thought it was Linux operating system. Where did that come from? It's the idea of, you know, respect, sharing, helping. The idea of community, selflessness, which leads to this value, you could say, this value dimension called collectivism. That would be the biggest difference between us here in Finland, who are quite individualists, to over there where, hey, let's share things. The example will be is that if we're sitting in a room like this and one of you pulled out their lunch and started eating an apple, that would be just fine. But there, they wouldn't want to pull out the apple because they want to share with everyone else, so they would slice it up. It's that kind of mentality. So when I show kind of this diagram, all I want you to just take a quick look at the idea of the difference between Finland and Namibia in terms of individualism and power distance. Also, that region, particularly Namibia, is quite hierarchical. You just don't go up and talk to the president. You need to get the right invitations. You got to be connected through the right people. Whereas here, it's a lot more closer. You sit at the lounaspöytä or the lunch table with the CEO. Nobody cares. So just there's quite a bit difference. So focus on human relations. You got to go through the hierarchy. That's why the connections that we have with our projects over the past 6-7 years, we can connect people so that you can use the right channels to get to the right people because of that human connection and human relation. It's not like a export market where you get the order and you send it. That's very rare. It's who you know, and we're going to work together with us over a couple of years. Decisions take a while, so your payback is going to be a little longer. And what does that mean? That you may be having to, you may be looking at getting your money back after maybe, I would say 3 years, because you're getting involved with something with them. You may not require huge investment, but your time and energy will be there. And then they say, hey, they're a friend of ours. They're helping us with our development. Sure, we'll get them into South Africa, to Botswana, Zimbabwe, and other countries in there, because you're considered part of the same team. So yeah, there's definitely a stratification. You would mention, someone asked a question one time when I mentioned this matriarchy, is that when it comes to women's rights, it's there's very many parliamentarians are women. The perinto, as you say, the inheritance even goes through the mother's side and so forth. So there's these things that cultural norms. A fairly indirect communication style there, a lot of small talk, the relational things, not so much the rules, but the relations. Contracts are honored. They're not as detailed. They're not expecting litigation. They're not those big, huge American and German contracts. They're usually a couple pieces of paper, invitation to do business. But they're definitely honored, what's written there on paper. A lot of show of emotion. Questions will be asked, you know, if you having a bad day, they'll show it, they'll tell you about it, whereas we may not be that interested in divulging our personal matters. Happens over there. Oftentimes asking, you know, how did you sleep last night? Personal questions. How did you sleep last night? How's it going with you? You know, it's like that's kind of, it's quite close. There's the idea of time, especially when Namibia's sun is right up there in the same place, pretty much 365 days a year. It's kind of like time is considered the place where, you know, where the sun rises and sets. That is the time. Time, the sun determines the passage of time, not so much the clock. Oh, high contact culture. You might go into an office and there's, you know, 5, 6, 7 people kind of crammed in there. Everybody's happy. Kind of just, of course, there is with regards, there's certain social rules there, but generally it is a closer type of in your face and close, kind of touchy-feely. Meetings and so forth, just for some practicalities, you know, clear participation is expected. They're taken seriously. Oftentimes, you'll notice that the one in the highest power status position will do most of the talking in an official meeting. But then after the meetings, that's where some of the best information comes, and Minna can attest to that. You're there, you're involved, and then meeting comes to an end. The chairpersons finish their talk, and then some of this other discussion is going. And as I mentioned, contracts are valued, but there's room. No one's looking to litigate, as we've seen in other business cultures, penalties and so forth. That's less. I mentioned about rule of law. It's not the wild, wild west. Maybe West Africa, but it's not the Wild West. That's one thing that we noticed, and I noticed down there, and talking to higher officials, is that the rule of law applies. They know that there needs to be order. Corruption has to be kept at a minimum. Not big risk takers, even though they're personal at the beginning and get personal, they're going to be a little bit. If you're getting into a factory situation where you're looking at employees, you've got a joint venture or some kind of strategic alliance, generally agreeable. Employees, you know, they may be reserved. You may see some of the studies that productivity might be a bit lower, but they've noticed differences in performance between workplaces. So there's something about this collectivist and how you incentivize that makes a difference there. So as far as that's just a quick little overview of the business culture in Namibia and why that's a useful place to start. Some of the companies interested in expansion may actually have billing or invoicing within Namibia, but I would see it more as you start the production, you start the product development, doing the pieces with Namibian partners, and then you go into with their contacts into South Africa or the other countries over a long-term period. And just to wrap it up, just imagine being part of a business, being part of a venture where you're actually bringing concrete well-being to the citizens of the country and the countries around you. And that's one thing that I find very interesting there. You know, we make the sales, Western Europe, a German company buys our product or we're involved with them. Well, the standard of living is pretty good there, but in a place like that, you're actually with that venture, you're providing water and schooling and housing for a community or being a part of that. There's something to be said about that.